According to an article in a medical journal called Heart Attack Prevention, this year about 785,000 people will suffer a heart attack, and 1 American every minute will die from a heart attack. And a recent article from Daily Mail spoke about a 22-year-old college student by the name of Gail McInerney, who is featured here. She was working towards a sports science degree in college when her life was brought to a halt. She was very diligent about jogging every day and was known for never having taken a sick day off of work in 4 years. But without warning, she died of a heart attack. These are not just elderly people or adults who are suffering from massive heart attacks, but young men and women and teenagers like ourselves, who are living a lifestyle that may not seem as though it can lead to a heart attack, but it does. It is crucial that each of you understands what can cause a heart attack, so that you can do everything in your power to lower your chances of suffering a heart attack. My grandfather has actually suffered from 2 heart attacks in his lifetime now, and after his most recent one, I decided that I wanted to learn some more and research more about what exactly a heart attack is and what causes it. I'm confident that the information I will share with you today is not only applicable to each one of your lives, but it is also credible information that comes from health and academic journals, from the Harvard Heart Letter and Johns Hopkins Medical Journal. Today I will speak to you about the basic background and some information about what heart attacks are, some causes of heart attacks, and a couple of ways to lower the risks of you yourself having a heart attack. After you have a brief understanding of what a heart attack is and how they come about, you will then be able to better understand and how they can affect you. So let's first start out with talking about who suffers from a heart attack. In an article from a Johns Hopkins Medicine Journal, it addresses the false impression that heart attacks is a man's disease. Although it is higher percentage that men do get heart attacks, it also says in this article that a 40-year-old woman has about a 1/4 of a chance of dying of a heart disease than a man of the same age. It also says by the time a woman is 75 years old, the heart attack is the main killer of women. Women are 6 times more likely to die of a heart attack than they are of breast cancer. So what is a heart attack, you may ask? Well, first off, what does it look like for a heart to be functioning properly? As you can see, this is a normal artery that has no blockage, and in a healthy heart, the blood flows through the coronary arteries so it can increase the demand for more oxygen, as during exercise your heart needs to work more. As you can see on the right, during a heart attack, an artery usually gets all the way or mostly all the way blocked, so that the blood cannot flow to the heart. This creates a problem because the heart cannot pump. Because each of you now knows a little more about what a heart attack is, let us now talk about what can cause a heart attack. There are 3 main causes of heart attacks I would like to talk to you about. There are of course others, but I just want to touch on 3. The first one is emotional stress. In an article called A Link Between Emotional Stress and Heart Attacks by Nathan Seppa, he explains the finding of a study focused around 34 men who had recovered from heart attacks that occurred on average 15 months earlier. The article talks about the many things that people encounter on a daily basis, such as getting in arguments with family members or suffering the loss of a loved one. All of these things cause stress, and all of these things are triggers of heart attacks. When put through a series of simulated challenges that simulated stress, these 34 men were put through these challenges that simulated stress, and the scientists found that because of this stress, it caused platelets to accumulate on immune cells. This buildup triggers heart attacks. As individuals, we all need to be aware of our stress levels and try to control it whenever in any way possible. Stress is inevitable in everyone's life, but it is necessary to focus on living life in a much calmer fashion. Our second cause that I would like to speak with you about is sleep disorders. Because besides stress, many sleep disorders can also factor in triggering heart attacks. Many people suffer from a different assortment of sleep problems that affect the heart in a variety of ways. In an article from the Harvard Heart Letter, it reveals that during sleep apnea, the back of the throat actually relaxes, cutting off the oxygen. And during these sleep apnea sufferers actually stop breathing 15 to 100 times an hour while they're sleeping. Unable to get a good amount of oxygen, the heart is not able to pump the blood through the body efficiently. There are other sleep problems that can also cause high blood pressure, and this high blood pressure then damages the lining of blood vessels within these arteries, and this creates inflammation, which then leads to heart attacks. Just a little connection, for instance, when a person does not have a good night's sleep, this is going to then lead to more stress the next day. The third cause is health factors. There are many different factors, such as cholesterol, inflammation, and blood clots that are risk factors for heart attacks. When it comes to cholesterol, the journal called Heart Attack Prevention talks about how our liver actually produces all of the cholesterol that we need. So any extra cholesterol we bring in from our diet is not necessary and is going to build up on the artery walls. Okay. When we have inflammation within the arteries, the plaque from the inflammation begins to burst, and then they start to burst. Let me play this video.
The heart is responsible for pumping oxygen-rich blood to the rest of the body, providing the energy that the body...
This explains what a heart attack is. I skipped over it, but just go back a little ways, and this explains what more of a heart attack is.
Body needs to function. The muscles of the heart itself also need a supply of blood. The coronary arteries, one of which we see here, fill that need. Sometimes a cholesterol plaque forms on the side of the artery, reducing blood flow. If part of that plaque breaks through into the artery, platelets tend to attach to it, creating a blood clot, further reducing or blocking blood flow. The blockage in the artery prevents blood from reaching part of the heart muscle.
Alright, so it was talking about that plaque and the blood clot. And when the plaque ruptures, it creates that blood clot, and all the blood cells rush to that blood clot area, and this causes the blockage that you can see on the right-hand side within the artery, and this then leads to the heart attack. These health factors will not wait around to be resolved by themselves, and that's why all of us need to be aware of these things and stay on top of our health problems, because one thing can lead to another. Now that you know some of the major causes of heart attacks, let's talk about what you can do to lower your risk of a heart attack happening. The first is physical activity. There are many benefits to staying active. According to a journal called Heart Attack Prevention, physical activity can increase the risk. Physical activity can increase the workload that your heart can handle, so increase the endurance of your heart, and this relieves stress and blood pressure from your heart. Also, the Heart Attack Prevention Journal says that in about a study that was done on women who simply walk 30 to 45 minutes 3 times a week, it decreases their chance of having a heart attack by 50%. The second way that you can change your lifestyle in a way to lower your risk of having a heart attack is weight control. Weight loss will lower your blood pressure. You can also take an antihypertensive medicine that will also benefit and decrease your blood pressure. In this article in the journal, it says that weight loss affects your blood pressure, and even losing 5 to 10 pounds can decrease your blood pressure level. Now let's sum up what I've gone over. We've gone over the basic information of heart attacks, who suffers from them and what they are, the main causes of a heart attack, emotional stress, sleep disorders, and other health factors, and 2 lifestyle changes that you can make, physical activity and weight control. In conclusion, from a recent interview done on Good Morning America, Christine Steiger was interviewed by a Dr. Richard Besser on her story of survival. Christine suffered a heart attack just 4 days after her 39th birthday, and she survived. Many questions needed to be answered though. Christine described herself as being in the best shape of her life and always eating healthy and running 5 miles every day, but she still had a heart attack. I challenge you to not only evaluate the way you are living your life, but also take any possible sign of a heart attack seriously. Thank you.
The gold piping on Roger Federer's tennis shirt and jacket passed muster in 2009. But when the Swiss master strode onto Wimbledon's center court this year, wearing orange-soled sneakers, that was a step too far, even for a 7-time champion. This excerpt from Liz Clark's article in the Washington Post shows that the sport of tennis alone has many traditions, but the Grand Slam tournament in England is especially strict when it comes to tradition. Sports are a huge part of American culture. We all know about the big tournaments of other sports like the Masters for golf, or the World Cup for soccer, or the Super Bowl for football. I think it's important that we all recognize and appreciate Wimbledon for what it is, a classic sporting event. I myself have played tennis for about 12 years. It's been a big part of my life for 6. I've played competitively. I love Wimbledon. I spend 2 weeks every summer watching the tournament. I've spent hours researching its history and traditions. And some of the articles that I've got information from are A Brief History of Wimbledon, the article called In 2013, Wimbledon Maintains Its Traditions Amid Calls for Change in the Sport, and another article called Top 10 Wimbledon Traditions. As a preview, I'll go over the history of Wimbledon, then I'll talk about the traditional practices at Wimbledon, and then I'll go over the role that Wimbledon has played in shaping the game of tennis. After we look at where Wimbledon began and the many traditions that still exist today, we'll see how those traditions can be connected to what tennis is as a sport in general. For the history of Wimbledon, I got most of my information from an article called A Brief History of Wimbledon by David Zaks. Tennis emerged in 1873. It was adapted by an Englishman from some similar sports that were played. He originally called it spheristiki, which comes from a Greek word, but they changed it to just lawn tennis because that was easier to say. Tennis was very popular among the upper class, and men said they liked to play it because it was healthier and more exciting than croquet. Lawn tennis clubs arose in the next couple of years to form rules for the game because not everyone agreed on how it should be played. So the All England Croquet Club was the original club in England, and then when lawn tennis was created, it became the All England Croquet and Lawn Tennis Club, and then now what it's called is just the All England Club, and the lawn tennis part of it is understood. The first championship was held by the All England Club in 1877. The tournament was originally supposed to be just for amateurs, but the word amateur meant something different to them. Amateur was synonymous with gentleman, and they didn't want professionals in their sport in the tournament because professional was synonymous with manual laborer, and that was too low for them. The tournament grew in a huge way in just 30 years. In 1877, at the first tournament, there were about 200 spectators. By the mid-1880s, there were thousands, and then by just 1905, competitors were coming from overseas to participate. So now that you know where Wimbledon found its beginnings, we'll look at some of the specific traditions that the tournament holds to this day. Most of my information for this came from 2 articles. The first one was in 2013, Wimbledon Maintains Its Tradition Amid Calls for Change in the Sport, and that was by Liz Clark, and then another article, WTA Tour's Top 10 Wimbledon Traditions. I'll go over 8 traditions, and then we'll move on. So the first tradition is that the matches are always played by gentlemen and ladies. You'll never hear anyone talk about them as men and women. It's always gentlemen and ladies. And all umpires will always refer to the women as Mrs. or Miss, whatever their appropriate title is. So when they say Maria Sharapova's name, they'll say Miss Maria Sharapova, and generally they do the same for men, except they say Mr. The second tradition is that players must bow or curtsy to the queen when she is there. Originally, there's a royal box for spectators, so like all royalty or celebrities will sit there, and originally the players would have to bow to the box no matter what, but they've changed it now, so only when the queen comes they have to bow or curtsy to her. The third tradition is that all players must dress head to toe in all white. That's what I was talking about at the very beginning of the speech. The only time that they don't have to wear white is when the Olympics are played there. So a couple years ago, during the Summer Olympics, they didn't have to wear white, but besides that, nothing else is allowed. The fourth tradition is that the middle Sunday of the tournament is set aside for rest. It's a 2-week tournament, so that middle Sunday, no matches will ever be played. The fifth tradition is the ball boys and girls. If you've ever watched a tennis tournament, you see the kids that run really fast and they're not supposed to really be noticed, but they are referred to as BBGs, and they go through some pretty intense training. They are chosen from local schools, and they start training in February. So they have about 5 months of training, and they have to be scoring experts, and they have to know how to move and stand correctly in order to be a ball boy or girl. The sixth tradition is there is a hawk named Rufus that is trained, and he is at every tournament, and his job is to fly around the courts and make sure that all pigeons stay away because that would degrade the tournament. The seventh tradition is that Wimbledon is played on grass. This is the only Grand Slam tournament that is still played on grass. All other tournaments have changed to either clay or hard courts, but Wimbledon keeps its tradition of grass and hopefully will. The eighth and final tradition is that all spectators, not all, but most spectators eat strawberries and cream. When you go to like a baseball game, you probably are going to get a hot dog or something like that, but when you go to Wimbledon, you eat strawberries and cream. In a recent year, about 59,000 pounds of strawberries and 2,000 gallons of cream were consumed by spectators, so that's a pretty big number. It's a pretty big deal to them. So now that we've looked at some of the interesting practices that take place at Wimbledon, we'll look at how the tournament itself has played a role in shaping the sport it showcases. Most of my information here came from the article A Brief History of Wimbledon and then another article called A Gentleman's Game by Kit Sprosen. Tennis began at Wimbledon. It was invented there, and that's where it started. So it was a sport for the upper class, and it's really interesting. The rules that were used in the very first match in 1877 are the exact same rules that are used today, with almost zero change. Wimbledon also set the bar for conduct of men and women in the sport of tennis. Players are expected to be gracious, even in defeat. And if you've ever seen Roger Federer, you'll see that he is one of the most gracious and gentlemanly athletes that you'll see. Also, the class that you see at Wimbledon, the way they conduct themselves, are what have given tennis the title of a gentleman's game. So in conclusion, I'll review some of my main points. A brief history, tennis was adapted to what it is today in 1873. The All England Club held its first championship at Wimbledon in 1877, and huge growth happened in just 30 years. Some of the traditions that are held are that ladies and gentlemen must always wear all-white attire. Players must practice their bow or curtsy in case the queen shows up to their match, and no one will ever play a match on the middle Sunday of the tournament. Spectators also must build an appetite for strawberries and cream. Wimbledon has also had a huge effect on the sport of tennis. Tennis got its beginnings at Wimbledon. The same rules that were used in the very first match in 1877 are used today, and Wimbledon set the bar for gentlemanly and ladylike conduct in the sport of tennis. Wimbledon is a monumental tennis tournament that holds its traditions firmly. It's held in high esteem and respected all over the world. To understand it simply, hear what former number one player Stefan Edberg had to say. He said, "For me and most other players, if you had to pick one of the Grand Slams, you would pick Wimbledon. It's got tradition, it's got atmosphere, it's got mystique."
Some people believe football is a matter of life and death. I am very disappointed in that attitude. I can assure you it is much, much more important than that. That was a quote from Bill Shankly. He was an England manager from 1950 to 1974, which just reiterates the importance of soccer to some people. So I'm sure most of you have heard about the World Cup, but you probably don't know much about it or what it is. A lot of you don't understand the importance of it or the effects it can have on a country. My credibility, I played soccer since I was 4 years old. I played on many different levels in club teams, and then I used a lot of sports websites, and just from watching soccer, I know a lot about it. So I'll explain to you guys about the World Cup, its structure, how it works, how it can affect a country, stuff like that. So now that you understand the importance of soccer and the World Cup, I'll explain more how it works and the effects it can have on a country. Structure of the World Cup, it occurs every 4 years. There's a different nation hosts it every 4 years, and in order to become the host, you have to submit an entry to FIFA, like the Soccer Federation. You have to have multiple stadiums across the entire country for them to use. Then after a bunch of countries submitted in, the officials get together, have like a conference, and decide what country will host it that year. So then the tournament starts off with qualifying, which takes place over 3 years because there's so many teams, which is the reason you have to play it every 4 years. Each region submits some teams like South Africa, Europe, and some even in the Caribbean. They play a series of games, and the teams that finish in the top of that region are sent to the World Cup. The actual tournament takes place over the summer and is about a month long of competitions. Teams are put into groups, 8 groups of 6 and 1 group of 5. Win gives 3 points, a tie gives 1 point, and a loss gets 0. After each team in the group plays each other, they count up the points, and the top 2 teams advance to the next round. The round of 16 is what the next round's called, and that's because there's 16 teams left to compete for the final spot. So then the teams are put into a bracket based on how they did in their group stage and stuff like that. And then they play each other in single elimination games until 2 teams, the best teams, advance to the final. The top 2 teams compete to see who is the winner of the World Cup. The winner of the World Cup gets the World Cup trophy, which is considered the greatest prize in all sports. Now that you understand a little bit about the World Cup and how it works, I will just explain some of the effects it can have on a nation. The World Cup is such an enormous event for a country. It has many economic impacts. For example, when the U.S. hosted the World Cup in 1994, we gained over $623 million just from hosting a soccer tournament. And in 2006, when Germany hosted the World Cup, it generated $3 billion for its nation and helped them in an economic crisis they were in. And this year, the World Cup is in 2014, the World Cup is supposed to be in Brazil, and currently right now Brazil is in a terrible economic crisis, and if the World Cup goes as planned, it should bring them out of the crisis and turn them back to what they used to be before the crisis. And then the World Cup brings a huge amount of patriotism to a nation, because like every 4 years when the World Cup comes, each country in the World Cup develops a huge amount of patriotism. The entire country gets behind their team and supports them. Some fans will even go across the world to go to the games to cheer them on. It means a lot to many people. So, in conclusion, review, the importance of the World Cup. It's very important, as you can tell. The structure of the World Cup I explained. It's got the qualifying, the tournament, the round of 16, the final. It's a very big deal. And then it can have many effects on the nation like the U.S., Germany, and Brazil. So, yeah, it is the most watched televised event in the world. It can save a country from an economic crisis, and to the players, it is more than just a game.
Did it start already? Sorry. Congratulations! Today is your day. You're off to great places. You're off and away. You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own, and you know what you know. And you are the guy who decide where to go. Perhaps you remember this book or many other stories by Dr. Seuss. Children's stories are very important because they stay in our memories forever. Dr. Seuss's real name is Theodore Seuss Geisel, and if we understand him as an artist, we can appreciate his life's work more. Personally, I am studying to become a children's book author and illustrator. I hope to make stories that are successful, lasting, and edifying. My thought is that by studying inventive and brilliant people, we can hope to become inventive and brilliant ourselves. And who have we known longer than Dr. Seuss? We're going to take a look at Theodore Geisel's life, his political stand, his work, and the reception of his work. By considering how he lived, we can understand the influences on his work and know why everyone liked it so much. Theodore Geisel was born in 1904 in Springfield, Massachusetts. Springfield made its way into a lot of his stories. Even some people from there were drawn in his books. His mother was named Henrietta Seuss Geisel. Seuss was her maiden name, and she rhymed to her children when they were little, and so that's probably why he rhymes all the time. His father was a zoo superintendent, and so Theodore spent a lot of time sketching animals when he was little, and he kept on doing that his whole life. He went to Dartmouth College when he was older and became the editor-in-chief of the Jack-O-Lantern magazine. Theodore got in trouble for drinking at one point, and that was kind of a big deal because it was during the Prohibition, and so he started signing his work Seuss so he could still turn in things to the jack-o'-lantern. He went to Oxford University in England after that, and then dropped out because he thought it was boring. After that, he came back to the United States and became a cartoonist for Standard Oil and the Saturday Evening Post. He also worked for PM Magazine, where he submitted political cartoons. His political cartoons were very direct. He made foreign enemies and complacent Americans look really foolish because he thought that we should go to war. His views enter children's art as well as his political cartoons. The Butter Battle book is actually about an arms race, and Horton Hears a Who is also a call for people to look out for everyone who's smaller. He says a person's a person no matter how small. In the same way that he wished to defend Hitler's victims, Dr. Seuss was very protective towards children at large. I have some quotes from him about children I think I'll read to you. Theodore Geisel said, "I'd rather write for kids. They're more appreciative. Adults are obsolete children, and the heck with them." He said that he didn't have any kids, but he also said, "I don't think spending your days surrounded by kids is necessary to write the kind of books I write. Once a writer starts talking down to kids, he's lost. Kids can pick up on that kind of thing." And isn't that true? I really like, in this book I started reading to you, how he validates children very much. He says, "Out there things can happen, and frequently do, to people as brainy and footsy as you. And when things start to happen, don't worry, don't stew. Just go right along and you'll start happening too." Dr. Seuss was very good at encouraging children, and he also wanted them to think on their own. He never shoved his messages down their throats, but instead just kind of suggested certain things and let kids figure them out for themselves. He also knew how to appeal to children's imaginations. He made reading fun. He made up really goofy words and really goofy creatures, and he used first grade vocabulary lists for a lot of his work. The Cat in the Hat, he actually was looking through a vocab list and was thinking, "Oh no, how am I going to write a story with only these words?" And then he found hat, and he found cat, and he said, "That's genius," and then he just went to town on it. Also, a friend of his made a bet that he wouldn't be able to write a story in only 50 words, and so he went ahead and wrote Green Eggs and Ham, and we know that that's overwhelmingly successful. We often hear about Dr. Seuss's success, but we not as often hear that he started out with failure. His first book was rejected 27 times before it was published. But good thing that Dr. Seuss was persistent. He lived for 87 years and left 200 million copies to the world. Theodore Seuss Geisel was able to use his life experiences to develop a worldview that affected his work and his way of treating his audience. There's one story where he said that turtles are free and maybe all creatures should be, but he only said maybe because he wanted everyone to see that for themselves. He also said that he starts drawing and eventually the characters involve themselves in a situation. At the very end, he would cut out all the preachments. The way that he treated his audience made his work very powerful. We should pay attention to what made his work last, and then get on our way making our own work. I have one more piece for you guys. And will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98 3/4% guaranteed. Kid, you will move mountains. So, be your name Buckswim or Bixby or Bray or Mordecai Alley Van Allen O'Shea. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting, so get on your way.
I was almost looking at a secret that humans weren't supposed to see. It's too beautiful. This was a quote from the astronaut Michael Massimino from an article written by Malik Turk. My name is Sarah Smith, and today I'll be informing you about astronauts and the training they undergo specifically for NASA. Astronauts have made large steps and discoveries in science, and you've all heard that every little boy wants to be an astronaut. A lot of information that I've gotten comes from the NASA website and a book called Preparing for the High Frontier, which is a credible peer-reviewed book. I'll be talking about the Johnson Space Center, the intensive training that they go through, and the accomplishments that they've had. Learning the discoveries and the experiences that astronauts have had will give us a greater appreciation of what they have done. The Johnson Space Center is the nation's center for training astronauts for NASA, and the facilities that they have prepare astronauts for unique settings of microgravity. They have equipment, vehicles, and the environment that they will be. The simulators that they have are highly realistic and train them for vehicle operations. They become familiar with the station, the shuttle, and spend about 300 hours in the simulators. They move on to a virtual reality lab, which is supposed to recreate microgravity that they will feel in space. The Sunny Carter is another facility that they use, and it's the world's largest indoor pool. It's 6.2 million gallons of water, 20 feet long and 40 feet deep. This is supposed to simulate the weightless environment that they will be having, and for every hour that they spend in space, they spend about 10 hours underwater. The aircraft training is another facility in the Johnson Space Center. It's specifically for the pilot astronauts that will be landing on other places that will be going in space. The runway that they land on is 7 times longer than the commercial runway that you would have for a normal plane, and they practice about 1,000 approaches before doing one real approach. The growth that the Johnson Space Center has had since 1959 has been incredible. The Mercury program was the very first program they had with only 7 members, and it's grown to 150 once getting to the ISS program, which is the International Space Station program. They had very different requirements for astronauts at that time. There was little training, and they didn't have such intensive things that they had to go through before entering space. The men and women have grown a lot. Since 1959, 320 astronauts have gone through from America, and 50 international have gone through the training. 240 U.S. and 130 international make up the NASA corporation today. With the knowledge of what the Johnson Space Center has done, we can move on to exactly how their intensive training works. It's the most competitive selection process for all astronaut training facilities, and they have 2 years of intensive training before they can have a flight assignment. They go through something called boot camp, which is classroom things where they learn about earth sciences, meteorology, space science, and engineering. They're subjected to rigorous medical and psychological screening to make sure that they can handle space, and they're exposed to highly stressful and mental situations, like in the jungle, the mountains, and water places they have to get through. In the beginning of the program, for U.S., Soviet Union, and China, they only took people from an aviation background, so only people with flight skills. But recently, U.S. and Russia have expanded to getting scientists, engineers, and physicians. They announced recently that they're accepting candidates from an article by Adam Hadhazy called "Why Does Everyone Suddenly Want to Go to Space?" because 6,300 applicants submitted to NASA, and and they've only opened applications 19 times since 1959. In 1996, it took a man 12 years to get into the training program. The hard work that they put into their occupation has definitely had payoff. On December 14th, 2009, they launched a Survey Explorer spacecraft that took about 1 million pictures of space, uncovering objects that we had never seen before. It answered a lot of questions about the origins of the planets, the stars, and galaxies, and a lot of data that we can further analyze. On February 11, 2010, a Solar Dynamics Observatory spacecraft was launched to study the sun and the various, it's called space weather with the sun, how it affects our atmosphere and the Earth. Studying the space weather helps us better know when to let astronauts go into space to protect them and the equipment that we have. They were honored at the Aviation Week and given many awards. from an article by Newswire called NASA Team Receives National Recognition. It's quoted, "Extraordinary individual team accomplishments in the global aviation, aerospace, and defense industries." The women also got an award, the Legend Winners Award for the first women astronauts. The JLP and the Lockheed Martin astronaut Stardust team was honored for collecting the first comet dust ever been collected. In conclusion, the Johnson Space Center has affected all of us by all of the things that astronauts have done that we don't realize. The intensive training that they all go through takes up a lot of their time, and they have to dedicate their lives completely, but the payoff that they have is remarkable. The things that we've been able to learn and do, and the advancement in technology that we've had to be able to do that. People that are brave enough to do that stick out in my mind, that can dedicate their lives to becoming an astronaut. I thank NASA for rolling up their sleeves and doing things that we never thought was possible.
Strength is the capability to break a piece of chocolate into 4 pieces with your bare hands, but only eat one of those pieces. This quote was said by the author of Love and Guilt and the Meaning of Life, etc., Judith Bjorst. Most of you in this room probably agree with this quote. Chocolate is loved by many people. If I would ask any of you your favorite candy, probably a lot of you would say something that has to do with chocolate. In fact, many holidays are centered around this popular treat, such as chocolate bunnies at Easter, the mint-flavored M&Ms at Christmas time, and of course, hearts filled with assorted chocolates at Valentine's Day. Therefore, a great deal of money is spent on chocolate yearly. Times Magazine reported that the U.S. spent $3.4 billion on chocolate, and that was back in 1981. So how much more would we spend on chocolate now? Reading many articles, such as The Study Gives Skinny on Chocolate by Janice Lloyd, and The Benefits of Giving Dark Chocolate on Valentine's Day, which was written by dietitians from Orange County Institute, I learned a great deal about the health benefits of chocolate and the things that would help your health by eating specifically dark chocolate. The articles I used in my research were written by accredited doctors and skilled researchers. I would like to tell you about my findings. I found a lot about the history of chocolate, how chocolate is made, and most importantly, I'd like to inform you about the health benefits that you would receive from eating chocolate. It's important that you have an understanding of the history of chocolate before you can learn about the health benefits that it gives you. Cocoa beans first were grown in Mexico by the Aztecs. They would use it as a beverage. They would drink it cold, and it was really, really bitter. And actually the emperor then, that was his preferred drink. He would drink nothing but chocolate. It also was used as a currency. They would use it to exchange almost like money. 1 bean, you could get 1 tamale, and if you had 100 beans, you could buy a turkey. And that was actually found on a 16th century document from the Aztecs. When Columbus came to the New World, he brought cocoa back to Europe. In Europe, the beverage was turned into a hot drink instead of drinking it cold, and in 1828, that's actually when hot chocolate came out, the kind of hot chocolate that we drink now. It became known as a luxury drink. The rich people and like the queen would drink that, the hot chocolate. And then after the Europeans discovered the Americas, that's actually when it became sweetened with cane sugar or honey, because they didn't like the bitter flavor of the cocoa. In 1828, a way to make powdered chocolate was discovered by a Dutch chemist, and that is actually what turned into solid chocolate that we know today. Joseph Fry was the person who came up with the first candy bar in 1847. He made that by melting the solid chocolate and then molding it into a bar. And then 40 years after solid chocolate was discovered, the first chocolate company was created in England, and that's the Cadbury Company, which we all know for the little Cadbury eggs. And then by Nestle was actually the first milk chocolate that was available on the market. And the company that we all are probably most familiar with is Hershey's, and they started rolling out the chocolate at 1905. As you've just heard, chocolate has had a very long history. Now I will tell you all the ways that chocolate has been made throughout the years. Back when the Aztecs drank their chocolate cold, they would first roast the beans in either a pot or actually on the shovel, like on a shovel over their fire, and that would break open the beans, and then they would just rub the broken beans between stones and it would become kind of a paste, and that's how they would drink it. They just mix it with water. And then the early Europeans, they actually discovered a way to make a factory, and it was basically the same thing. They would just roast the beans and then they would crush them into a paste, but it was more of a factory system on a bigger scale. And then the modern factory now that we have today, they take the beans and they try to find the very perfect beans, the ripe ones, and they do the same thing basically. They roast them and then they grind them and they press them. But now we also mix the paste with sugar, with cocoa butter, milk, and sugar and extra flavoring to make it what it is today. Now that you know the ways that different chocolate is made, you should be informed on the benefits that you can gain from eating this delicious treat. Chocolate is also often associated with excess body fat, acne, and overindulgence. However, it is proven that dark chocolate and semi-sweet chocolate are good for your health. Because of the cocoa content, it gives you a lot of benefits, such as lowered blood pressure. It provides the antioxidants that your body needs, and it also improves your mood. The magnesium that cocoa has, that is what lowers your blood pressure, and then it raises serotonin levels in your brain, which cause the improvement in your mood. People who eat dark chocolate, which is enriched with antioxidants called flavonoids, have a reduced risk of blood clots. The registered dietitian Nancy Copperman advises limiting chocolate, at least the chocolate with a high cocoa content, to about 1 ounce a day, and that should be enough for you to receive the health benefits that you would need. Most grocery stores, such as Meijer and Walmart, sell chocolate with cocoa content up to 90%. So I almost brought some of that in today, but I decided not to. Although it may be surprising that chocolate can be healthy, most people forget that it is made from a fruit, which is what separates it from most candy. In conclusion, I'll remind you of the history of chocolate. Beginning in Mexico with the Aztecs, it was drank as a cold beverage and used as a currency. And moving to Europe, it became a hot drink and eventually a luxury to the rich. And now, here in America, it is sweetened, molded into a candy bar, and became chocolate as we know it today. The preparing of chocolate has also changed drastically, from being simply roasted and ground by the Aztecs to being processed in a complicated factory system. Through the making of chocolate has become much more sufficient for the demand that we have for it today. No matter what chocolate has been through to get to your mouth, the health benefits are significant. Lower blood pressure, antioxidants and better moods, and a lower risk of blood clots are all great results of eating an ounce of dark chocolate per day. Now you know how longer have to feel guilty after you indulge in your chocolate. After all, as comedian Joe Brand stated, anything is good if it's made of chocolate.
I keep a close watch on this heart of mine. I keep my eyes wide open all the time. I keep the ends out for the tie that binds. Because you're mine, I walk the line. I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with this because it comes from one of Johnny Cash's most famous songs, I Walk the Line. Johnny Cash is relevant to all of you because you should be familiar with music in some way or another, and Johnny Cash has been a major part of music. Johnny Cash also gave others the opportunity to succeed when they probably shouldn't have. And as an American, you've probably heard the musical talents and abilities of Johnny Cash. I'm credible on this topic because I have listened to Johnny Cash since I was very young, and I've done hours of research on him over the years because he is an inspiration to me. And a large portion of my information comes from the books Johnny Cash, The Man in Black, and Johnny Cash and the Paradox of American Identity. Through this speech, I will talk about the history of Johnny Cash, his rise to fame, and the legacy that Johnny Cash left. Once you are able to see the history of Johnny Cash and his struggles to fame and fortune, you'll be able to see why he is so important in the history of music. Johnny Cash was born in Kingsland, Arkansas on February 26, 1932. He was born John R. Cash because his parents couldn't think of a name for him when he was born. He was the fourth of 7 children and the son of Southern Baptist sharecroppers. By the age 12, Cash had wrote many songs and was playing the guitar. Throughout his high school, Johnny Cash played for many local radio stations in Arkansas on a weekly basis. As a late teen, he moved to Detroit and joined the Air Force as a radio operator in Germany and served in Germany for 4 years. In his adult life, he left the military and moved to Memphis. Soon after leaving the military, he married Vivian Liberto in 1954, and they were married until 1967. With her, he had 4 beautiful daughters, Roseanne, Cindy, Kathy, and Tara Cash. He also married June Carter in 1968, just a year after ending his marriage with Vivian, and they were married until his death in 2003. Now that you understand a small portion of Johnny Cash's life, you will be more able to see how he rose to fame as a country music idol. Cash's fame started when with the Tennessee Two, that consisted of guitarist Luther Perkins and bassist Marshall Grant. He began recording with them at the Sam Phillips Son Label Recording Company in 1955. The trio recorded some of his most famous songs, Cry, 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 and Folsom Prison Blues. And he also recorded I Walk the Line, which was his million-selling hit. He also was a part of the $1 Million Quartet at Sun Recording Studios. And he also was in impromptu sing-along groups, and his label mates consisted of Elvis Presley, Carl Perkins, and Jerry Lee Lewis. His career fully established in 1958 when he signed with Columbia Studios. He moved to Ventura, California for this great musical opportunity. Not long after moving to California, he began his 9-year addiction to drugs and alcohol. Through this addiction, he still recorded some famous songs, including Ring of Fire. Now that you have a clear view of the groups that Cash has been involved with and the many songs that he has written, it will be easier for you to see the reason that Johnny Cash's legacy is still true today. Cash died at the age of 71 on September 12, 2003, in his home in Memphis. His many accomplishments consisted of being a member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame, being inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he has written over 400 songs. His marriage with June Carter also helped him become very famous. They toured together for over 35 years and became known as one of country's most famous couples. Cash had a different way of thinking, and this changed a lot of things. I'm going to read a quote from you by Johnny Cash that will explain this more. You build on failure. You use it as a stepping stone. Close the door on the past. You don't try to forget the mistakes, but you don't dwell on it. You don't let it have any of your energy or any of your time or any of your space. If you analyze it as you're moving forward, you'll never fall in the same trap twice, which I can't say that I haven't been guilty of doing. But my advice is, if they're going to break your leg once, when you're in that place, stay out of there. Cash, through this way of thinking, opened many doors for men just like him all over the world, who were poor growing up and struggled through life and had to work for everything that they wanted. But Cash loved music and it was everything to him, and he let that influence him. In conclusion, I talked about the history of Johnny Cash in his childhood, early adult life, and his adult life. His rise to fame through the Tennessee 2, the $1 Million Quartet, and his signing with Columbia Studios. The legacy of Johnny Cash, his many accomplishments, his marriage with June Carter, and his way of thinking and all of the changes that it made. Johnny Cash's talents and abilities were displayed in many ways and left a clear mark in musical history. Cash's way of life was not easy and he had to work hard for what he wanted. But in the end, he left a legacy that will never be forgotten.
Never before and never since have there been so much writing on one athlete. If Robinson succeeded, he succeeded for all the blacks. But if he failed, he would affirm the belief of many white people at the time that blacks were inferior. This quote comes from an article in USA Today called Jackie Robinson Deserves More Than One Day by Chris Lamb. Jackie Robinson faced many trials and hardships throughout his life, but he never once gave up. He was able to push through and overcome, in fact. Jackie Robinson was the first African-American Major League Baseball player, but he definitely wasn't the last. After Jackie, he opened many of the doors for many more blacks to come into Major League Baseball, and this changed the game forever. He debuted with the Brooklyn Dodgers organization in the mid-1940s, and I'm sure most of you have seen the movie 42, which talks about Jackie's life and the trials he faced. But in case you haven't, here's a brief summary. In the historical sports drama called 42, it relates the historic 1947 baseball season in which the Brooklyn Dodgers general manager, Branch Rickey, played by Harrison Ford, decides to sign the first ever black Major League Baseball player, Jackie Robinson, played by Chadwick Boseman. Throughout this time, Jackie faces ugly and vicious racism from other clubs, fans, and even his own teammates. Ricky encourages Jackie not to fight back, and by following that advice, he allows for his remarkable talent to show for itself. Soon the first-year player became one of the most popular players on the team, and eventually he received the Rookie of the Year award. I have studied a lot of information personally about Jackie Robinson, and he is someone who inspires me greatly. Much of my information comes from the articles Jackie Robinson, A Man of Faith, and The Artful Dodgers. My information also comes from the book Jackie Robinson by Amy Witherby. In my speech today, I plan to hit on some of Jackie's background, his early career, and his major league career. Now that you have a brief understanding of Jackie Robinson, who was the first ever African-American Major League Baseball player, I can talk about some of Jackie's background. In the book, Jackie Robinson, by Amy Witherby, it talks about how Jackie was born in Cairo, Georgia in 1919 to a family of sharecroppers. His mother, Mallie Robinson, single-handedly raised Jackie and her 4 other children. And the prejudice they encountered only strengthened their bond because they were the only black family on their block at the time. From this humble beginning would grow the first ever black baseball player to break Major League color barrier that segregated the sport for more than 50 years. Now that you understand more of Jackie's background, I can talk about his early career. Before Jackie's baseball career in 1942 to 1944, Jackie Robinson served as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. He never saw combat though, because Jackie was arrested and court-martialed during boot camp after he refused to sit at the back of a segregated bus during training. He was later relieved of all the charges
and received an honorable discharge. His courage and moral objection to segregation was just a start to the impact that Jackie Robinson would have on Major League Baseball. In 1945, Jackie played one season in the Negro Baseball League, traveling all over the Midwest with the Kansas City Monarchs. But greater challenges and achievements were only ahead for Jackie. In 1947, Brooklyn Dodgers president Branch Rickey approached Jackie about joining the Brooklyn Dodgers. At first, Jackie was more than hesitant about this, but he was ready. Jackie knew what he was signing up for, but little did he know about how hard it would really be for him. Here's a quote from Branch Rickey talking to Jackie about joining the Brooklyn Dodgers. "Jackie, we've got no army. There's virtually nobody on our side. No owner, no umpires, and very few newspapermen. And I'm afraid many fans may be hostile. We'll be in a tough position, and we can only win if we can convince the world that I am doing this because you're a great baseball player and a fine gentleman." When Jackie first put on a Brooklyn Dodgers uniform, he courageously challenged the deeply rooted customs of racial segregation both in the North and South. Now that you understand more of Jackie's early career, I will talk about Jackie's Major League career. At the end of Robinson's rookie season with the Brooklyn Dodgers, he had become National League Rookie of the Year with 12 homers and a league-leading 29 steals. In 1949, he was selected as the most valuable player of the year, and as a result of his great success, Jackie was eventually inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. These are the times in history that we never want to forget. How someone like Jackie could grow up with a single parent, be criticized like he was, play baseball with a Negro team, then become the first ever African American Major League Baseball player. It's inspiring. Some famous words from Jackie are these: "Life is not a spectator sport. If you're going to spend your whole life in the grandstands just watching what goes on, in my opinion, you're wasting your life. And a life is not important except in the impact it has on others' lives." Last one: "There's not an American in this country free until every one of us is free." These words from Jackie can have a deep impact on us all. Jackie lived for what was right, and he didn't care whether you liked him or not. He just cared whether you respected him as a human being. Eventually, Jackie's number, which was 42, was retired in honor of him and all that he stood for. Jackie fought for what he believed was right, and in the end, he became famous for standing up for how he felt. Jackie can be an inspiration to us all. I challenge you all to stand up for what is right and make a difference.
You guys ready now? Special Olympics is important to me because of my uncle, who is pictured here on the screen. As you can see, he's quite humorous, and my family always says that everybody just needs an Uncle Rick in our family because he just brings us so much humor and joy. My uncle's name is Rick, as I had just said, and he has an undefined mental disability. The disability causes him to have the mindset of an 8-year-old. During his high school years, my uncle began to struggle with relationships with his peers because he just simply didn't understand why he was different than everybody else or why everybody treated him different. My grandma found out about Special Olympics through some of her friends that she had met in Ohio where they were living after my grandparents got divorced, and she was a single mother to my mom and then my uncle. She was able to find out about Special Olympics and immediately got my uncle started through Special Olympics. Special Olympics means so much to me because about 2 years ago we almost lost my uncle, and just seeing how Special Olympics has started again to positively affect his life and how it's affected my life and my mom's life over the many years that he's been involved with it has taught me various life lessons. As I move on and continue to tell you about Special Olympics, it will affect you because at some point we all have had an encounter with somebody who has disabilities. Whether it's somebody in our class who has autism or just somebody that doesn't seem to fit in, it pretty much can be chalked up to that they do have some type of mental disability. Learning about Special Olympics will also give you an organization that you could refer people who are disabled to help them go through the struggles that they go through on a daily basis with other people that are going through the same thing that they're going through. Or also, it'll give you a place where you can volunteer and help these people. Personally, I
helping with Special Olympics for several years now, and I also have had first-hand experiences with my uncle of how it affects his life. I've studied Special Olympics for several school projects as well. Today, I would like to inform you about about the history of Special Olympics, how Special Olympics has affected individuals, and how Special Olympics has affected my family. Now that you know about why I'm so passionate about Special Olympics, we can move on to a little bit about the history of Special Olympics. Sorry, just ignore that, it's not going to work. According to Special Olympics official website, and to an article called Special Olympics that was in the Learning Disabilities Practice Foundation, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, who is the sister to our former president, John F. Kennedy, started Special Olympics as a summer camp in 1968. Special Olympics helps people with mental disabilities, strictly only mental disabilities too. If you want to confuse this with people who have disabilities aren't always going to have a mental disability, they can have a physical impairment. That would be the Paralympics, which would help people that have a physical orthopedic disability, so they might not be able to use their legs or their arms. Special Olympics helps over 20 million people today in over 170 different countries. And then they also help these 20 million people in more than 32 individual sports where they receive year-round training. And their goal as a Special Olympics, as the national foundation, is to always have their athletes give it a brave attempt. So this doesn't mean that they're trying to say, oh, you're losing, you're winning. It's always like, you know what, as long as you're trying something, you're winning. The Indiana Special Olympics branch, according to their official site, they help people in 20 sports and service over 11,000 athletes. As I mentioned before, Special Olympics helps individuals, and this is how they do it. On October 27th, I had the opportunity to interview Judy Blubaugh, who is my grandma, and also my uncle, Rick Bowen, about Special Olympics and how it has affected them as individuals. My grandma told me that friendships are created through Special Olympics, not only for my uncle as he was going through high school and struggling with friends, but my grandma was also to create friendships that helped her and supported her through the struggles that she was going through as a single mother. And then my mom was also able to create friendships with other people her age that had siblings that were disabled as well. And it also gets disabled people up and moving. As many of you know, people that have a disability tend to have problems with their weight. And so this helps not only with them being to have friendships through sports and activities, but it helps them with their health. And also teaches appropriate social skills through communication with each other. And according to Delano Hawaske, who wrote, "They are the champions. Individuals can learn character strength," which just means that they are learning how to be secure with who they are and being proud of their disabilities. And they also can learn that they're not losers, that they're simply brave winners, according to the foundation site. Special Olympics not only helps individuals, but it also helps families like my own. During my interview with Judy Blubaugh, who I mentioned before is my grandma, I was able to find out how Special Olympics has specifically helped my family. My grandma told me that as she was a single mother, she often had trouble finding somebody who could take care of my uncle even when he was old enough to normally take care of himself. He couldn't because he has a mental disability, which leaves him with the mindset of an 8-year-old. So Special Olympics created a place for respite care for my uncle. It was a supervised place where my grandma could take my uncle after school, where she could go and run to the grocery store if she needed to without him, because he often would cause trouble with grabbing the eggs and dropping them on the floor. But she could take him there when she just simply needed a break and needed time away from having to take care of him 24/7. It also created a sense of belonging for my mom, who was, at the time, she is only 364 days older than my uncle. So during high school, she was 16 when he was 15, and she was also getting made fun of because of her brother, and it made her realize that, she needed to express that he is important to her and why he is important to her, and it gave her a sense of belonging with being around a community of people that were going through the same situation as her. And it also offers many support groups. They offered support groups for the students that were athletes, and then support groups for my grandma who was struggling at the time to understand why my uncle was being treated the way he was and why he wasn't getting the appropriate care that he needed at school. So she was able to have somebody with her to help her through the whole process. It also taught my uncle many life skills such as communication because he does have a speech impediment, and it taught him sportsmanship because he is very in the mindset that he is the one that needs to be in charge all the time and that he is the one that's always right. So it taught him how to understand that he doesn't always have to be the one that's right, and he doesn't always have to be the one that's winning, and to be proud of other people and their accomplishments as well. I also created many friendships for my uncle, and he still participates specifically in bowling today, and he also gets to meet with those friends a couple times a week in practice. And then I created friends for my mom through high school, and it eventually ended up leading to my mom pursuing a career in special needs. I also created friendships for my grandma, as I had mentioned before. And then my uncle told me himself that it helps him maintain a healthy lifestyle through exercise and playing sports. In conclusion, I would like to remind you how Special Olympics helps many people around the world. As we learned earlier, the history of Special Olympics, it was started in 1968 by Eunice Kennedy Shriver as a summer camp, and now today it helps 20 million people in 170 different countries. Special Olympics helps individuals with their social skills through activities, friendships, and it helps them create the mindset that they are winners. Special Olympics helps my family through respite care, through creating a sense of belonging, support groups, teaching my uncle life skills, and through volunteer work. Shriver believed that starting a summer camp would give people a chance to feel that they are loved. From personal experience, I can tell you that this truly works. During my interview with my uncle, I asked him what he wanted me to say to you, and he said that Special Olympics simply creates friends through sports, and that it's simply just amazing. Sorry.
According to Paul R. Robbins in his book Romantic Relationships, most rapes in the United States are carried out by persons who are acquainted with the victim, not by strangers. I am one of those victims of attempted date rape. My freshman year, I dated a guy, and we were really close friends. Never would have expected it. As we were walking, he tried to rape me. A call from his mother saved me. All of you have heard stories about rape victims. Some of you may even know somebody who has been raped or is a victim of attempted rape. Knowing the effects can help each and every one of you stop rapes from occurring, or even knowing when a rape might occur in your own life. Much of my information comes from the books Victims of Sexual Assault and Abuse, Romantic Relationships, and Treating the Trauma of Rape. I've done much research in the library here at Grace, and I, as I said, am a victim of attempted rape. In my speech, I will be discussing 3 aspects. The first is that date rape is a crime. The second is date rape can affect members of both genders, not just women, which is often a misconception that many people think. And date rape has many lasting effects on his victims, often life-altering effects as well. So there are many ways that date rape is wrong, and there are many people who are affected, and there are many ways that they suffer from the rape. However, there is only one true definition of what a rape is. So what is considered rape? According to Paula K. Lundberg and co-author Shelley L. Marmion, in their book Intimate Violence Against Women, date rape refers specifically to sexual assault within a dating relationship. That can be attempted rape or rape itself. They talked about the weapons of date rape not being a physical weapon as a knife or a gun most of the time, but as alcohol, persuasion, and physical strength. So although date rape seems to be simple and an unexcused crime, many people are affected, both men and women. The rape of women was talked about a lot in the book Victims of Sexual Assault and Abuse by Michelle A. Paludi and Florence L. Denmark. In this book, they offered a lot of statistics. The first being that 77% of female high school students have experienced sexual coercion, which can include unwanted kissing, any sort of touching, or even words speaking different comments about sexual activities. It can include hugging and go as far as genital contact. They also said that 12% of college women that were surveyed experienced date rape within their life, some point on campus. Paludi talked a lot about the rape of men, more so than of women, and offered many more statistics on that subject. They said that boys and girls are both victims and perpetrators of relationship violence, not only females being the victim and men being the perpetrators. But often the predictors that come along are different for males and females, so you can't necessarily tell in the same sense that the woman was raped and so is this man. A lot of times it's different and more difficult to tell in a male victim. "67% of male high school students experience some form of sexual coercion, and 57% of men reported that they were verbally coerced into having a sexual relationship. They didn't want it, but they were talked into it. They were made to feel guilty, or like it was a necessary thing that they were forced to do. 63% believed that they needed sexual experience in order to be adequate, or they weren't manly enough and they didn't deserve to be with the girl, or other issues along those lines. So there are many effects on date rape on boys and girls victimized by the cruel crime known as date rape. And many of those have lasting effects, not only within the weeks prior, but within years. And those include rape trauma syndrome, which Edna B. Foa and Barbara O. Rothburn described in Treating the Trauma of Rape. There's 2 symptoms of RTS, which includes the acute phase, and is characterized by disorganization lasting from several hours to several weeks. The reorganization phase is the second phase, and is characterized by disorganization lasting from several hours to weeks. And then their description of RTS was that it resembles PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, and has lasting effects. Many victims suffer from feelings of fear, anxiety, guilt, shame, and depression, and increased use of prescription drugs and alcohol. They also have many physical effects, which include suppressed immune system functioning, fatigue and sleep, and eating disturbances. So a lot of times their anxiety causes them to have a loss of appetite. They can't sleep at night. One of the effects that they have is flashbacks and nightmares, which can also affect how they sleep and their day-to-day functioning. They have less satisfaction with life, often leading to suicide, and just decreased self-esteem and feelings of worthlessness, which, in my opinion, can also lead to the suicidal thoughts. They feel uncomfortable being around other people and view the world negatively, and also have many problems with their trust in other people, being able to get close to a person, or even with their friendships that they have had in the past. They seem to shy away from any sort of contact toward their friends and family because they are ashamed, or they don't have that trust that they once had because they did trust the person before. And then triggers and cues also have a big effect. Triggers can be anything from going to a certain place or hearing a certain sound, and that can set off the flashbacks, or at night the nightmares, and cause many issues along those lines. So in conclusion, Date rape refers specifically to sexual assault within a dating relationship. Both men and women can be victims and perpetrators of date rape, and there are many severe and life-altering effects of date rape on its victims. According to Siddell Katz and Mary A. Mazur in their book, Understanding the Rape Victim, a synthesis research finding says 18% of rapists were boyfriends and dates. Remember, you owe them nothing. It is considered rape.